back to my channel. My name is Cass, and today is going to be a very special ASMR. If you've been following me for any amount of time, then you're probably aware that I've been dealing with a lot of grief because 1 year ago I lost my brother. He's my baby brother. And he was almost 7 years younger than me. And he had an illness that caused brain damage when he was a baby. So he grew up severely handicapped, mentally and physically. He was perfect to me. He's very, very special to me. And after he passed away last year, I became re-obsessed with the book and the story of The Little Prince. So tonight, I thought we could talk about the story, and I have some related triggers for you because I like to display bookish items for some of my favorite stories on my shelf. As you can see, I have the book The Little Prince back here. One edition. I have a rose. Under glass protection. I have this crown that represents the Little Prince. This is my favorite illustrated children's edition of the story. It has stunning illustrations. And we're going to put my brother right there while we talk. And I have a couple of other editions of this book to share with you all. I have this little teeny tiny pocketbook version. It's paperback that I love. I bought each of my children one of these to remember my brother after he passed last year, to put in their memory boxes and to have, as they grow, as they get older. Several of my children also love the story of The Little Prince for different reasons. So this will not be a spoiler-free chat. This book has been around a very long time. It's considered a classic. And so, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend that you read it. It's not very long. But I'm going to share a little bit about it. So, the premise of this book is that, first of all, this book was written during World War II by a French patriot who was trying to flee France and fight against the German occupation. And he was a pilot. This story, the narrator is a pilot who has crashed in the African desert. And he's been stranded there. And while he's in the desert, he comes across this boy, the little prince. And he can tell there's something different about the little prince. He begins to talk to him and ask him questions. And the little prince tells him, this pilot, his story. And as he tells his story, the pilot is trying to figure out how to fix his plane so that he can get out of the desert alive. So the pilot is the narrator, but the little prince is telling his story. And what we learn is that the little prince came from this planet. It's a tiny planet, one of billions of stars in the sky. He was the only person on this planet. He took very good care of his planet. And eventually, a flower bloomed on it. Not just any flower, but a rose. And the rose could speak, of course. In this story, it's a fantasy. And this rose is kind of, let's call her high maintenance. Okay? She requires a lot. She talks to the prince. She makes demands. She's got a big personality. And the prince enjoys her company. And he takes good care of her. And she grows and she blooms. And he tends the grounds around her to make sure that the baobab trees don't grow that are native there. Because if the baobabs grow, they are very prolific, could easily kill the rose and also take over the planet. So he's very diligent about clearing any seeds and making sure that no baobab trees grow on the planet. He also has 3 volcanoes on his planet. Just little ones. Little volcanoes. But there's 3 of them. And he stomps them out and shovels them and makes sure that they don't take over the planet and that they don't hurt the rose. But one day he gets really frustrated with his beautiful rose because she seems very demanding. And he leaves her on his tiny little planet. And he goes to explore the universe looking for answers. And I think, trying to figure out the meaning of his life and his purpose. And he visits several other planets in the sky, and on each one he meets a different person. He has a lot of curiosity. He visits 6 other planets. He meets a king on one of the planets who has no subjects until he arrives. He's his only subject. He meets a conceited man. He meets a businessman, a tippler, a lamplighter, and a geographer. And each of these characters on each of these planets have something to teach him, some kind of value or moral about life, the purpose of life, and they're basically like the big sins of the world, things to be weary of, things that can hold you back or that can be detrimental to life. And eventually, his 7th and final stop is the planet Earth. So, this is another edition that I have of this book. It's the Wordsworth hardback edition. It has a canvas texture to the cover. So here you can see the prince is on his planet. This is the asteroid that he's from, surrounded by all of these stars in the sky because the stars are very symbolic. And we'll get to the stars. We'll get to some of the symbolism. And then on the back is the fox. And the fox is one of the characters that he meets while he's on Earth. And the fox is very, very wise. So let's talk about his journey on Earth. So after visiting these other planets and having these interactions with these other men, and their different struggles. He finally falls to Earth, and he's in the desert. But this is 1 year prior to the pilot crashing there. He goes on a little journey on Earth in the months leading up to running into the pilot. And the first thing the little prince encounters when he lands in the desert is a golden coil on the ground that reminds him of the moon. And we quickly learn that this coil on the ground is actually a serpent. And this serpent speaks to him and tells him he's in the desert and that there are no people in this area of the world and that the earth is very big. And he lets the prince travel on, but he tells him that if he ever wants to go back to his planet where he came from, that the snake, the serpent, he can help him get there. To come back to the desert and find him when he's ready to go home. So, the little prince journeys out of the desert, and he comes across a garden full of flowers. And as he's speaking to the flowers, he finds out it's a garden of roses. And there's hundreds of them. And he's disappointed because his rose on his planet said she was the only one of her kind. And he is disheartened to find that she is not the only one of her kind. That there are, in fact, many, many roses in the universe. And he continues on his way, and he comes across a fox. And this fox is a wild fox. And of course, he also can talk. And he begins speaking to the little prince. And asking him questions about why he's on Earth and what he's trying to do. this is another edition of the book. I believe that it's most representative of the original publication and includes the original illustrations. Because when the author wrote the book, he also drew his own illustrations, which are very much a part of the story. So, on this book we have the little prince on his star, on his asteroid, his little planet. You can see one of the little volcanoes there blowing up. All these other little planets and stars around his base that he's eyeing. Okay. And on the back you can see the little prince, weeding his garden, weeding his planet, keeping it safe from the baobab trees. I'm going to take this cover off, but I did want to show you the author. So this is the author. You can see him with his pilot gear on. And we can assume that the narrator in this story, who's a pilot, is, somewhat symbolic of the author himself. His own thoughts, his own insights. This is the naked book underneath. And we just have this one star here. Just one star, no other stars. Just the one. Just the one that is representative of the little prince's planet. So let me open it up and I'll show you some of the illustrations. Some of them are in color. Some of them are in black and white or grayscale. But I believe they're true to the original illustrations that the author made. So here we have the prince. The prince is described as having golden blonde hair, and he's wearing this, regal coat, what you might expect to see on royalty. Here's another illustration, which is the inspiration for the cover, obviously. The dust jacket on this book comes from this original picture. So, the little prince and his planet and the volcanoes and the baobab trees trying to grow, all the stars and planets around him. Again, here you can see him tending to his planet, digging up the volcanoes so they don't explode. And here you can see his rose, the glass cover to protect her from the elements. And you can see on this planet is where he met the king that had no subjects. And the conceited man here, who only was aware of himself and dressed to the nines in a suit and a hat, and is just very concerned with how he looks. And the drunk man who drinks to numb out the shame he has for drinking. And the accountant, the businessman, who claims to own all of the stars and spends all day every day counting all of his stars. Representative of money and wealth. And then we have the lamplighter who goes around all day lighting lamps and putting them back out on a schedule, not really paying attention to anything else around him, just doing his one duty all day, every day, even if it didn't make sense. And then we'll skip forward to where he comes to Earth. And he's out of the desert. And he's here in the woods. And you can see his fox right here, coming out of the foxhole. And I'm going to read So he meets this fox, and the fox is very wise. And the prince tells the fox that he's looking for people. And the fox tells him, "There are no people here right now. The only people I ever see are hunters who are trying to kill me." And the prince clarifies that he is looking for friends. And he says to the fox, "Come and play with me." And the fox says, "I cannot come and play with you. I am not yet tamed. You must tame me first." And the prince asks him, "What does tame mean?" And he tells him, "Tame means to make ties." And he proceeds to tell the boy how to tame him. And the little prince tames the fox. And they become tied to each other, essentially building a relationship with each other. A connection and an attachment forms. And he tells the fox about his rose on his planet. And the fox realizes that the prince still has lessons to learn. The fox sends the boy back to the roses. He says, "Go look at the roses again. You'll understand that yours is the only rose in all the world. Then come back to say goodbye, and I'll make you the gift of a secret." So the prince goes to see the roses again. And, he's matured and he's learned some things after taming the fox and spending time with the fox. And he says, "You're not at all like my rose. You're nothing at all yet. No one has tamed you, and you haven't tamed anyone. You're the way my fox was. He was just a fox like 100,000 others. But I've made him my friend, and now he's the only fox in all the world." And the roses were humbled. And the little prince goes on, he says, "You're lovely, but you're empty. One couldn't die for you. Of course, an ordinary passerby would think my rose looked just like you. But my rose, all on her own, is more important than all of you together, since she's the one that I've watered, since she's the one I put under glass, since she's the one I sheltered behind a screen, since she's the one for whom I killed the caterpillars, except the 2 or 3 for butterflies, since she's the one I listened to when she complained, or when she boasted, or even sometimes when she said nothing at all, since she's my rose." And then he goes back to the fox with this newfound wisdom to say goodbye. And the fox tells him a secret that he promised him. "Here is my secret. It's quite simple. One sees clearly only with the heart. Anything essential is invisible to the eyes." It's the time you spent on your rose that makes your rose so important. "People have forgotten this truth," the fox said, "but you mustn't forget it. You become responsible forever for what you've tamed. You're responsible for your rose." And the prince takes this lesson and he moves on in his journey. And by this point in the story, they've been in the desert together, talking for several days. And the plane is still not repaired. And they are out of water. So the prince and the pilot go in search of water in the desert. And they do come across a hidden well. And this hidden well of water is everything to them because they are in the desert and they have no other resources and they are very thirsty. So the next night, the pilot's been working on his plane, and he comes back to the well, and he can hear the boy, he can hear the prince talking to someone or something. He can hear him before he sees him, and as he approaches, he sees him sitting on a rock wall by the well. And eventually he sees that he is actually talking to the snake again. The serpent is there. And the pilot immediately senses that the serpent is dangerous. And the serpent and the prince are making a deal together. Remember, the serpent promised the boy that when he missed his planet and he was ready to go back, that he could help the boy get there. And he's explaining to him that the way back is for him to bite him with his poison, that the only way back to his planet is through death. And the pilot intervenes and tries to explain to the prince that this serpent is dangerous. The pilot is immediately defensive, and he tries to explain to the prince that the serpent is dangerous and that he should stay away from it. But the prince knows something that the pilot doesn't. The prince explains to the pilot that he met the serpent before when he fell to the earth 1 year before. That it had been 1 year since he came to Earth, and he was ready to go home to his planet, to his rose. And that his way home was to let the serpent bite him with the poison. And the pilot says, "But I would like to hear you laugh again, little prince. I love your laugh." And it's kind of in a way, he doesn't want the little prince to go back to his planet. They've become friends and he doesn't want him to leave. And the prince says, the important thing is what can't be seen. And the pilot says, of course. And the prince says, it's the same as for the flower. If you love a flower that lives on a star, then it's good at night to look up at the sky. All the stars are blossoming. Of course, says the pilot. It's the same for the water. The water you gave me to drink was like music. On account of the pulley and the rope. You remember? It was good. Of course, says the pilot. At night, you'll look up at the stars. It's too small where I live for me to show you where my star is. It's better that way. My star will be one of the stars for you. So you'll like looking at all of them. They'll all be your friends. And besides, I have a present for you. He laughed again. Oh, little fellow, I love hearing that laugh. That'll be my present. Just that. It'll be the same as for the water. What do you mean? The pilot asks. People have stars, but they aren't the same. For travelers, the stars are guides. For other people, they're nothing but tiny lights. And for still others, for scholars, they're problems. For my businessman, they were gold. But all those stars are silent stars. You, though, you'll have the stars like nobody else. You, though, you'll have the stars like nobody else. What do you mean? Asked the pilot again. When you look up at the sky at night, since I'll be living on one of them, since I'll be laughing on one of them, for you it'll be as if all the stars are laughing. You'll have stars that can laugh. And he laughed again. And when you're consoled, everyone eventually is consoled. You'll be glad you've known me. You'll always be my friend. You'll feel like laughing with me. And you'll open your window sometimes, just for the fun of it. And your friends will be amazed to see you laughing while you're looking up at the sky. Then you'll tell them, yes, it's the stars. They always make me laugh. And they'll think you're crazy. It'll be a nasty trick I played on you. And it'll be as if I'd given you, instead of stars, a lot of tiny bells that know how to laugh. And then he tells him, tonight I'm going to let the snake bite me so that I can go back to my star, to my rose. And you shouldn't be there because it will look as if I am dead. My body won't have life. He says, you understand? It's too far. I can't take this body with me. It's too heavy. But it'll be like an old abandoned shell. There's nothing sad about an old shell. It'll be nice, you know. I'll be looking at the stars too. All the stars will be wells with a rusty pulley. All the stars will pour water out for me to drink. and it'll be fun. You'll have 500 million little bells, and I'll have 500 million springs of fresh water. And they both cry. And the prince says, okay, it's time for me to go. But the pilot doesn't leave him. He stays with him as he transitions. So here is the star in the sky, the little bell laughing, the little prince laughing on his planet. Twinkling in the sky. Reminding the pilot of the little prince and his laugh. And the lessons he learned while listening to his story in the desert. He does get his engine fixed, and he's able to fly home his plane after the prince leaves. But I want to go back to this part in the book. It's actually towards the beginning, but I think it's very poignant. He's explaining about the importance of this book, of this story that he's telling us about the little prince. The narrator can also be thought of as the author of this book, says, "The fact is, I don't want my book to be taken lightly. Telling these memories is so painful for me. It's already been 6 years since my friend went away. If I try to describe him here, it's so I won't forget him. It's sad to forget a friend. Not everyone has a friend. And I might become like the grown-ups who are no longer interested in anything but numbers. Which is still another reason why I've bought a box of paints and some pencils." And then he goes on to say, "In the end, I'm sure to get certain more important details all wrong. But there, you'll have to forgive me. My friend never explained anything. Perhaps he thought I was like himself. But I, unfortunately, cannot see a sheep through the sides of a crate. I may be a little like the grown-ups. I must have grown old." There's so many really wonderful themes about this book, and it's easy to see why it's a classic because there's just so much in such a short piece of work. You could read this story many, many times and get something different out of it every time. But at this point in my life, the little prince is representative of my baby brother. And the wisdom that he represents, the pureness that the little prince represents showing up on earth with these nuggets of wisdom and knowledge that he's sharing with the pilot that most people can't appreciate or overlook because they're grown-ups and they don't think like a child anymore with the innocence and purity that children have. And the reminder that what's most important can't be seen, that it's what we invest in people that make them special because of the unique experiences we've had with them and all the time and love that we've invested in that person and that relationship. And that is why my brother will always mean so much to me. And I like the idea, at the end of the book, towards the end of the story, the little prince says that he's ready to travel back to where he came from, but he can't take his body with him, it's too heavy, and he has a long journey, a long ways to go, and that his body is really just a shell. And that's just so representative of my brother with his broken body on this earth. And I like to imagine that he is now free from that shell, from that body that actually held him back. And now he can be and go and do everything he was ever meant to. And when I look at the stars, I like to imagine him up there laughing and dancing because he was bound to a wheelchair in this life. And I like to imagine that where he's at now, he's singing and dancing and spinning circles and running around and doing all the things that he couldn't on this earth, on this planet, in this lifetime. And it gives me peace. The gift of having my brother in my life was that, like a child, because he was so delayed mentally, he was forever a child in this life. He was pure light and love. And so he always kept me anchored. I always refer to him as my anchor because when life felt overwhelming or too big or too complex and stressful, I would go and lay next to him, and I would remember that it's the people and the love and the relationships and the simple things that really matter in this life. And that you don't need a lot of money, a lot of things, or to look a certain way. To be happy in this life. That the things that mean the most are the people that we love, the people that we invest in, the relationships that we invest in, our families, our friends, our experiences, our knowledge. And that it's the pain and the loss that gives value to this life and reminds us and makes this life so beautiful. And the memories that we had together so special. Because if we lived forever, if there was never any loss, then we wouldn't appreciate what we had. So in a way, it is death that gives life meaning. So now I'll go back to this quote on the back of the book. Back to what the fox said to the boy. Right here is the quote on the back because it's pretty famous. And it's one of the poignant morals of the story. The fox says, "The most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or touched. They are felt with the heart." So I'll leave you guys with that quote. I hope you enjoyed this. Please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know below if you've read this book or if you plan to read this book. If you love it, let me know what you love about it, what lessons you've taken from it, what you learned from The Little Prince. And again, I just want to thank you for all of your support this last year as I've been dealing with my grief. Thank you for giving me this space to honor my brother. It really means a lot to me. I hope you guys have a wonderful day or night wherever you are.